Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Tour Pro Talks. I'm Genevieve White, travel and tourism copywriter, and I've got some good news and bad news for you today. So, the bad news is that this is going to be the last Tour Pro Talks for a little while because I'm going away to get some sunshine. And the good news is we have an amazing guest today. A very busy guest, I might add. Yesterday, he was talking at the Travel Tech Show in London. And tomorrow he's going to be guided around Bath by an AI Jane Austen. But today he is ours for half an hour, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what he's got to say. Welcome to Tour Pro Talks, Alex Bainbridge.
Hello, great to be here. I've enjoyed attending a few of these talks in recent weeks and months, so it's great to be here as a guest. Thank you.
Oh, it's brilliant to have you with us. So, Alex, if you don't already know him, he is a long-standing entrepreneur in the experiences sector. He's now focused on operating tours using AI guides and autonomous vehicles. So, Alex's work is really pushing the boundaries of what guiding even means. So, whether it's in a self-driving car or beyond the vehicle altogether. So today, Alex and I are going to be talking about AI's role in guiding and transport and what it means for the future of sustainable local first tourism. So before we start our chat, once again, a warm welcome to all of you in the audience. Please do say hello, say where you're watching or listening from, and also it'd be great to hear how you feel about AI in tourism. Are you freaking out? Are you welcoming it with open arms? What are your thoughts, worries, or interests about the future? So, anyway, in the meantime, Alex, let's get started with talking about where we are right now with AI in tourism. And I thought maybe just begin by asking you, Alex, what do you think AI in tourism actually looks like today?
Yeah, so the AI has been coming for a while. I remember speaking, keynoting at ITB in Berlin in 2018 about the impact of AI on tourism. But mostly when people talk about AI, they talk about generative AI. And of course, that came to everyone's attention when ChatGPT launched in, just maybe 2 years ago. But the reality is that AI has been coming for decades, and people have been talking about it, and now it's here. I think that the big fundamental thing that no one really is focused on yet is the change in travel product that happens as a result of AI. All of the conversations we have, and I speak at a lot of tourism AI conferences, they're all very focused on operating your business. So managing content, search engine optimization, handling reviews, maybe some sort of operational aspects, which is all fantastic. But to me, the big shift that is all happening is that AI is about and can do today operate guided tours in a city or in an area with no humans, and that's the big shift. That, yep, it's still in progress. It's not got any market share that you would expect. You can't say, well, have we lost 10% of our bookings to AI yet? So you can't say that, but you can absolutely see that that's the next big step.
And are we still, do you think, are we still kind of at the experimental stage with it then? Or I mean, where are we in terms of live products being out there?
So are we? There are different stages of different products. So if you go to the US, you can get in an autonomous car, which fundamentally is a robot, and you can take a perfectly good transport from your hotel to an attraction or your hotel to a restaurant, and there's been no human involved. That you can absolutely do that in 5 cities in the US and many cities in China and some cities in the Middle East. So from that perspective, that is here. And then for many decades, we've had self-guided tours, which are audio tours. Now, they're not necessarily AI, but they're on the kind of evolutionary path towards what comes next. So we've had that for a while too. So all we're really talking about is combining all of these different concepts into a single mechanism where you, as a consumer, can ask your phone, create me a 3-hour walking tour of London, and it would create the walking tour, and off you go. And that, that is here today. You can do that with ChatGPT. You can do that with all sorts of things, and yeah, that's here now. So here, not coming.
And that's what you're doing tomorrow with Jane Austen, isn't it? The robot Jane Austen.
Yeah.
So
It's quite what's interesting about using AI characters such as Jane Austen or Mary Shelley is also involved in that tour, and also Bo Nash, who's quite a famous architect from like 300-400 years ago. I don't know my history. I probably should. It probably wasn't 300 years ago, but I'm sure someone will comment if I've got that.
I'm not sure.
He's a dandy. I don't even know what a dandy is either, but there we are. Let's move on. The interesting thing there is that when you are a human tour guide and you're operating a tour, you've got one perspective, and that perspective is yours. What's interesting about using AI tour guides is that you can have multiple perspectives in the same experience. So you can have Mary Shelley's perspective, you can have Jane Austen's perspective, you can have Bo Nash's perspective, and so you can walk away from that tour and go, "Oh, I've seen it from different perspectives," and that's quite an interesting opportunity for storytelling.
That's I was thinking about that, just the whole storytelling perspective. That is very exciting. Right, I've been ignoring our lovely audience because I've been so interested in what you've been saying. So let's have some hellos. We've got hello to Hang from London and Verity. Hello, Verity from Coventry. Now, Verity, I know you've been doing some work with some of your own recorded tours. It'd be great to hear about some of your experiences. And Alain, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that, but greetings from Ethiopia. And Daniel, hello from Tanzania. And Verity saying, at the moment, ChatGPT generated tours are a bit strange.
Yeah.
I put one in for Peaky Blinders in Birmingham and it wasn't great.
That I completely agree with Verity. She's 100% right. And that is the reason why, at least in my business, we have local tour operators designing the tours because they're the local experts. And then we have AI operating the tours. That's a super important distinction because ChatGPT generated itineraries. They can be quite, they can be quite interesting, but they're not necessarily always totally practical. And they're certainly not necessarily commercially deliverable. So I'm a big fan of having the local tour operators design the experiences using their actual knowledge of how a tour should be operated in a destination, and then let the AI scale it by operating it whenever a consumer wants it.
And that really ties in with what we're going to be speaking about today, with this whole sort of local first and sustainability aspect as well, doesn't it? Here's Stefan, who's very interested in sustainability from Sweden. And hi, Stefan. And Fiona, hello from Edinburgh. Welcome, Fiona, as well. So, let's talk a little bit more about AI and sustainability. How do you think AI can support sustainability goals in tourism, and what's it doing at the moment, and how do you see that looking in the future? I think that's about 3 questions in there, but anyway.
So my biggest concern, and I have many concerns about AI. I'm not just a sort of a pro AI cheerleader. Although perhaps people might call me that, but I have one of my main concerns is that the consumer will open up their phone, they'll talk to Google's got a project called Project Astra, which that won't be the end product name, but that is that's what they've got, and it can operate a tour quite happily. And now you imagine every single Android phone having that. It's beginning now to roll out to Samsung phones. And Apple's got their own variant of it coming next year with Siri. There is no local tour operator involved. So all of a sudden we go from having tour operators who are local employers, who have got relationships with local restaurants and bars, and we go to some sort of these global platforms that are not really having any local involvement at all. And I think that's kind of a terrifying concept. And I don't want that. So that's the reason why I think the key thing, I've got sort of 3 key things that we need to keep local. So we need to keep money local, which means that the consumer, in the same way that when a customer books a tour today from a res tech, the money goes into the tour operator's account, or it should do. It might go via an OTA, but it goes into a tour operator's account. We need to keep mobility local. So we need local companies providing local mobility, and we need mindset to be local. So 3 M's. We need mindset to be local. I want a tour in France to be distinct to a tour in New York, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can keep those, so my 3M model is a little bit like the sustainable tourism's 3Ps model that everyone talks about. So we've got the 3M model. It's not a glue. And that is super important. So how, with that at front of mind, we still have to innovate. We still have to do things that might not be comfortable for everyone. However, if we keep those 3 principles while we're designing new systems in place, we're not going to end up replacing all local tour operators with some tech. But I have to say that there is a little bit of a sort of a counterpoint to that, which is this is a little bit like Noah's Ark. Noah didn't take 100 giraffes, right? So we don't need 100 of every single tour operator. So if you are a tour operator for a particular destination, we can't rescue 100 of you. We can only take 1 or 2 because that's all the market needs now. So I think that I think it's great that we can help local tour operators and enable them in certain ways, but it's not certainly a global solution.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what you're saying there, just to clarify, is that really a lot of tour guides' jobs could be at risk because there's going to be, there's not going to be the need for as many.
It's an interesting question. I think that there will be. So we're going to distinguish between tour guides and tour operators.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about Uber with ride hail back in the early days, they went straight to drivers. They did not go to taxi companies.
Mm-hmm.
So I still think we need tour guides. We
Mm-hmm.
absolutely need tour guides, but we may only need tour guides for 2 or 3 hours in a day with a particular guest who's in a location. And the other 18 hours that the customer is awake could be handled by an AI tour guide.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you have to imagine that if someone is in a destination for 7 days, they may today only take a commercial tour on 2 of those 7 days. So what's happening the other 5 days? So you have to expect that these AI tour guides will have some market share. But my concept is, how do we ensure that we integrate those human tour guides back into the experience? Because we do need the human tour guides, absolutely. So I'm fairly positive about human tour guides and less positive about tour operators. That's a sort of a nuance.
Yeah, I mean, if there may well be, well, I think there are tour operators watching today. So if any of them are watching and feeling a little bit nervous, is there anything you can say to them that might give them some inspiration about how they can future-proof their career?
Yeah. So if you think about what happened with music, I always like going back to music. We moved away from people being one kind of musician to another kind of musician. So we still needed the humans. We just didn't necessarily need the music halls like we had 100 years ago. So if you are a tour operator, that leaves some quite big, deep thinking. What is it your business does? Even if you're day tour, multi-day, whatever, there are variants that are safe, very safe. So if you're an activity company, then you're fine. AI isn't going to replace you anytime soon. And the other people who are safe are people who talk in the first person. So if you say, "Here is how I make the whiskey," you are the expert. You are doing this. You are actually going to be augmented by AI because everyone's going to want you. If you are a tour guide that takes people to a whiskey place and says, "Here is how they make the whiskey," you've got a whole bunch of trouble coming. So you need to be first person on something. So your family history, this is where we grew up. This is where we played on the street. Everything needs to be first person. And if you're not talking in the first person, you're going to be disrupted. That's the simple rule.
Yeah, I think that sounds like really good advice. And yeah, I mean, definitely for some people it might have to start thinking a bit more creatively. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely not all doom and gloom.
No, I think there are opportunities, and in fact, I'm excited about it. I think there are opportunities, but I do think that it is a change, and yeah, it's one of those areas that it's very individualistic. So for some individual in some markets, it will be a massive impact immediately. Others, it will be a slightly delayed impact. And as you watch this over the next few years, some markets will be going, "Oh, this is not hitting me yet, but I can see what's happened in XYZ location." And then people will be able to learn from that and go, "Oh, this is something that we should do." But people like me who are entrepreneurs, technology entrepreneurs in the sector, as I said, if we keep the mindset and the mobility and the money local, then whatever the innovation happens to be that's necessary over the next few years will be ensuring that the local tour operators are, or some of the local tour operators have got a good, sort of good strategy that they can adopt.
Brilliant. Okay, I've got another question in my head for you, but just a couple of hellos. Mike is watching early here in the US. Yeah, I guess it must be about 7 or 8 o'clock, possibly. I'm never quite sure of my time differences, but welcome, Mike. And Alex Farlander says, music's a very good example. Those musicians who are successful in business are experienced organizers, not just music writers. That's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can see a question coming in from Hang. So we'll just do a little detour from the question I was about to ask, because it's great to be able to fit audience questions in. So Hang says, with many travel companies still heavily reliant on search engine traffic, how do you see the rise of AI-driven answer engines like ChatGPT and Google's AI overviews reshaping the way tours and experiences are discovered and booked?
So there's a great it's a great question. I think there's a halfway house. Why would a consumer want to discover an 8-hour tour when they could just ask ChatGPT and their AI agents to generate them an 8-hour tour? So I think that's where the thinking has to be. So my sort of short-term reaction to this is to create shorter tours. So instead of having one 8-hour long tour, you have 3 or 4 2-hour long tours. So you still get the same duration. And that enables the consumer, the guest, to put that day together in a different order than what originally was planned. So they go, oh, actually, because I'm traveling with a young family, I need a longer lunch break, or whatever it happens to be. And that, so I think that we're going to end up with shorter, modularized tours. So they have to, obviously, if you're going to make them easy to do back to back, you're going to have to finish a tour at a location and you're going to have to start the next tour at the same location 5 minutes later, because you might have different families going on different combinations. So I do think that will be the immediate, and over the next couple of years, impact is that we'll have shorter tours that are modular, and that will be how we can still use the same reservation systems that we've got today, the same OTA retail that we've got today, but just and that will be the kind of the intermediate step before we start really having personalized itineraries for everyone.
Brilliant. And thanks for the question, Hang. Hang always asks very good questions. So you're obviously on form today as ever, Hang. And I think that, Alex, that brings us on to maybe talking a little bit more about personalization, because I know that's something that we have great scope for with these new this new AI technology. So how can AI be used to create personalized experiences?
Yeah, so personalization has got so many different aspects to it. It can be as simple as the fact that you're delivering a tour in French to a French customer. That's personalization. It can be also as simple as picking someone up from their hotel and starting where they're booked from, rather than saying, hey, you must go to a certain start point. That's personalization. Both of those are fairly obvious. A slightly less obvious one would be, for example, we've got a Stonehenge experience. David, I'm sure you're on. and from Bespoke England Tours, who's a great innovation partner. And with that Stonehenge tour, it's a fairly classical script. Well, it's not really a script. It's kind of fairly classical. You go around, you learn about Sarsens, and you learn about all these amazing things. But you can personalize it and say, this particular guest is really into music from the Beatles. And then as you go through your 5-6 hour Stonehenge tour, you are going to be constantly reminded about lyrics and songs from the Beatles. Now, so we can personalize it in all sorts of different ways. The most basic personalization, as I said, is language and start points. Then you've got the more classical ones, like that someone doesn't eat meat, for they're vegetarian, whatever it happens to be. And that, I think, is that's a good example. Mm-hmm. I was doing and I'll give you perhaps a silly example. As part of the Stonehenge experience that we've got, when you get to the Neolithic houses, so this is how you get a cooking lesson as to how they all cooked 3,000, 4,000 years ago, which is fantastic. And halfway through a cooking lesson I was doing the other day, the AI tour guide, she's called Dr. Claire Hart. She's not real, she's just an AI. She said, they didn't have tiramisu. And I was like, why have you just told me they don't have tiramisu? And it turns out that the AI knows that one of my food preferences is that I like tiramisu. So the AI had remembered that I like tiramisu. I do like tiramisu. The AI had remembered that I like tiramisu and had inserted this. They didn't have tiramisu into the cooking lesson. I was like, what on earth is going on here? And so personalization is quite weird, but quite fun.
That's a brilliant example. It sounds like the AI had remembered your preferences a little bit better than you had, actually.
Yeah, well, the problem is I've put in some slightly strange preferences because I quite like to know when the AI is telling me something from my preferences. So my test profile has got some weird preferences in, just so that I can spot them. Because if the AI is talking about something quite casual, and I'm going, hang on, have you got that from a preference or not from a preference? So I put some weird ones in. So I think I put one in about a particular way I like my pizza, just so I can see, so I can spot it when the AI mentions it. But talking about preferences, one of the things I've been doing over the last couple of years is we have this new cross-industry standard called HAT Pro. I don't need to go into too much detail now, but what that enables, and that's a global standard published as part of the Linux Foundation, Decentralized Identity Foundation. So it's all clear for open source and everyone to use. And that's going to enable, or it does enable, people to share their food preferences between AI and human tour operators and hotels and restaurants and bars. So if your first question that you always ask your guests, do you have any allergies? We really need to be able to, we should be addressing that. And that's going to be pretty exciting. But so, yeah, I'm big into personalization.
Yeah. Well,
I always say my line is, and I think anyone in the US will get this joke, everyone else won't. I always say we put the S in personalization, and because of course there isn't an S in personalization if you're in the US.
If you're in the US, it's a Z. Yeah. Talking of the US, here is Mike, who's from the US, with a question. So he says, are there any suggestions and advice on using AI in marketing and sales of 1-week tour packages?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if you have built a relationship with a customer as part of the sales process, you maybe have sold them something multiple times, or maybe you've had a long to and fro because this is a tailor-made tour in some way. You didn't indicate if this was tailor-made, and so there was a long conversation, or whether or not this is just like an e-commerce transaction. But one of the things you can do is, instead of having an AI Dr. Claire Hart on the Stonehenge experiences, you might have an AI Mike Healy, who continues to be the tour guide throughout the 1 week long package. So if you've built that relationship with the customer, the guest, then you can continue that relationship into the actual product experience.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, actually, just thinking about how AI could work as, like an extension of yourself and building that relationship and then continuing that relationship. There's just so much scope, isn't there?
Yeah, I've cloned myself into my own platform. So we've got about 55 AI tour guides, and one of them is Cyborg Alex. And Cyborg Alex has got my profile, it's got my personal background, and it's got a clone of my voice. And I know it's fantastic because I use Cyborg Alex to tell my 10-year-old son to go to bed. And he absolutely hates Cyborg Alex, which means that it must be a really good clone, because the voice is exactly right, the tone of what he says is exactly right, and therefore my son is like going, I hate this person. I'm okay. So yes, you can absolutely clone people. Good, that works for salespeople who've built a relationship doing a tailor-made tour. It also works for perhaps influencer concepts where you want to clone an influencer and make that influencer part of the delivery.
Wow. My mind is spinning now how this kind of robo-dad thing could also work in the parenting sphere, never mind traveling too.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that too.
Brilliant. Now, I can't believe this, but we are kind of starting to come towards the end of the discussion. So I think this would be a really good point, maybe, Alex, to start speaking about, the future of the future, and maybe talk about, some people who are watching might be concerned, about some of the things we touched on earlier. What regulations or frameworks should we be discussing, do you think, when it comes to this technology?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that the EU, which of course we in the UK are not in anymore, the EU is very good at putting regulation first and innovation second. So I don't think we should regulate until we've seen the problems. For example, people might say, is it okay to have an AI boyfriend or an AI girlfriend? Now, 40% of Gen Z who are single have tried having an AI boyfriend or girlfriend. So this is not some kind of theoretical thing. Now, should we regulate that like in Australia, where they said no one uses social media until you're 16? Well, shall we say you can't have an AI boyfriend or an AI girlfriend until you're 16? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of regulating until we know what we're regulating.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. I think you did send me a link about the tour guide of the future being your AI boyfriend or girlfriend, which was really interesting. And
Well, if you think about it, this AI boyfriend, I mean, I use the slang AI boyfriend, girlfriend. I don't think everyone's going to have an AI boyfriend, but I do think that everyone will have an AI assistant who they have a long-term relationship with in some way, because they share all of their deepest thoughts and interests. And I've got this friend, and I need to tell them something, and blah blah blah. They're going to know everything, right? And they are with you 52 weeks of the year. So why should we expect when that guest is in your destination that person is no longer talking to their AI boyfriend or girlfriend and they're suddenly going to use Jane Austen? Now, I've of course been building AI Jane Austen. That's absolutely fine. But in the end, I'm expecting it to be a kind of a hybrid scenario where the customer or the guest will have their AI boyfriend on their phone, and then during a tour with Jane Austen, we'll have to put a little bit of Jane Austen alongside the AI boyfriend. So we will have to get our data out of our platform into the AI boyfriend platform, because I think that's the only way to make it coherent. So I think we'll end up with conversations between people's AI boyfriends and girlfriends and Jane Austen and the human. That is the future of tourism, just there.
right. I don't know about the audience, but my head is completely spinning now. That's an absolutely wild scenario. Is that your vision for the future? Is that
a vision or is that a nightmare? I don't know.
I'm curious. I'd love to know what the audience thinks.
I mean, I work in AI, but I don't necessarily like everything that's coming, but I can absolutely see it is coming. I think that people, I mean, it's fairly clear people will have AI partners, and it's fairly clear we'll have AI tour guides. So it's fairly clear you're going to have to join the two together, because you, as a local tour operator, are not going to get the guest to stop talking to their boyfriend and AI boyfriend or girlfriend while they're on your tour. So you have to solve it somehow.
Wow. Okay. I feel like I've got a lot to go away and think about and research. Alex is asking, instead of what's your food preferences before the tour now, we'll be asking, do you have an AI boyfriend?
Do you know what? That's almost a great question just to start asking anyway, just because it will just create some interesting debate. Mitch doesn't like it, I can see.
Nightmare. Yeah, I think I might be slightly in the nightmare camp as well. Alex, it's been an absolutely brilliant conversation. Before we wind up, because it is time, is there anything we haven't spoken about in this half hour that you think we should have spoken about?
Yeah, I would just say look for your friends. There's a lot of tech that's out there that's trying to replace every aspect of human connection, and I'm not that. I'm here working with local tour operators, working in local tourism areas, and engaging. And so we may go down fighting because it's us versus the bots, but I am at least fighting on behalf of local tour operators and local tour guides. And I think that as long as everyone remembers that, I am not the problem here. I am the solution, right? I might be the bearer of bad news, but I am not the problem. Okay. And that, but there are many companies out there that are the problem because they are, and even some of them are doing deals with destination marketing organizations. And I'm like, what are you doing? Because they're creating technology that is completely disrupting local tour operators. I'm like, don't do that. So I am not the problem. I'll repeat. I think that as long as people keep that in front of mind, I am the solution. So yeah.
Well, I think we've all certainly learned a load. There's Hang saying, great session, Alex, learned loads. And I actually really like the sort of differentiation you made at the beginning. Before we went live, you were talking about Cyborg and, you know, why you've chosen to make that, you know, your profile. So maybe we could end with you saying a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I have this publication called Cyborg Guide, and I am now chief cyborg, I guess. And my social profile has got me as a half cyborg, half human, which is fantastic. But that fundamentally, there's a real serious point to this, which is that we're going to need to augment humans to compete with the robots. We can't have a human tour guide versus a robot tour guide because the robot will win. Okay, we need that human tour guide to be able to converse in 17 languages. We need the human tour guide to know that guest's preferences the same way the robot does. So we need to convert human tour guides into cyborgs. I know it's uncomfortable, but that is the only way that we keep the humans in the loop, and that's what we've got to do. So I am chief cyborg, I guess.
Brilliant. So yeah, that's a great note to end on. Be more cyborg, everybody.
Yes. And Cyborg is good. I'll just leave you one final thought on cyborgs. Think about the cyborgs in Hollywood. You've got Inspector Gadget, good cyborg. You've got T-800, Terminator, one of them. Various different Terminators for various different things, but let's go with the T-800, which is cyborg, good. Who else have we got? Robocop. Robocop's a good cyborg, right? And then we've got Darth Vader, bit of a debatable one. But you know, he was good in the end, right? For most of the film, he was bad. He was good for about 5 minutes of the film. You know, cyborgs are good. Cyborgs are good. It's the robots that are the problem. So we want more cyborgs.
Brilliant. I think that's a splendid note to end on. So everyone who's been watching today, thank you so much. I hope you've learned as much as I have. There's lots of comments from people saying they've really enjoyed the session. Thank you so much, Alex. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. Yeah, I'm excited to hear about how the Jane Austen tour goes tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you at the end of the summer when Tour Pro Talk starts up again. But until then, I hope you all have a wonderful summer. Thanks very much for joining us. Goodbye.